Good Lord, who would do such a terrible thing? The horrified cry echoed through the crowd in St. Peter's Square, just as the white dove, a symbol of purity and hope, was solemnly flying over the chimney before everyone's watchful eyes. In a tense moment, a stone emerged from the shadows and, in mid-flight, struck the bird, which plummeted from the sky amid screams, tears, and hands covering faces, spreading shock and outrage among the faithful, officials, and tourists. Could this be an ominous sign? A cardinal rushes in the middle of the conclave voting to aid the dove that fell in the courtyard. But suddenly, something unexpected happens. Want to know what happened next? Please click the subscribe button and tell us in the comments. From which part of the world are you watching us? The morning sun of May 7th, one of the most tense days of the conclave, bathed St. Peter's Square in an almost ethereal light. Thousands of faithful pilgrims and onlookers gathered in vigil, their gazes fixed on the slender copper chimney installed on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. Each wisp of smoke that emanated from there would be a verdict, an answer from the College of Cardinals to the yearning of the Catholic world. The air vibrated with a mixture of fervent prayers, anxious whispers, and an almost palpable hope. Cardinal Lorenzo Bellini, a man with an austere countenance, but with eyes that held a profound gentleness, observed the scene from the window of his quarters, which overlooked an internal courtyard, but from where one could glimpse the silhouette of the chapel. He himself felt the weight of responsibility that fell upon his shoulders and those of his brother cardinals. He sought a moment of serenity before joining the deliberations again. It was then that an immaculate brightness cut through the blue of the sky, standing out against the terracotta of the Roman rooftops. A white dove, with a whiteness that seemed to reflect the very light of the sun, appeared elegantly soaring over the area of the chimney. For a moment, it seemed to hover there, its wings beating in a serene rhythm, like a celestial messenger inspecting the place from which the great news should emerge. A murmur ran through the crowd in the square, who also spotted the bird. Faces lifted, fingers pointed. Expressions of astonishment and reverence took hold of many of the faithful. For the Catholic heart, the white dove is a most powerful symbol, the representation of the Holy Spirit, of peace, of purity, of new creation. To see it right there above the chimney that would soon announce the new vicar of Christ was for many an unmistakable divine sign. Whispers about the intervention of the Holy Spirit in the choice, about the promise of a papacy of peace and renewal, spread like wildfire. Some knelt instinctively, others made the sign of the cross, their eyes welling with an emotion that transcended the simple observation of a bird. Cardinal Bellini, from his window, also observed the scene with contained emotion. The beauty and symbolism of the moment did not escape him. A slight smile of hope formed on his lips, but suddenly the idyllic scene was brutally interrupted. A quick and hostile movement came from a less visible point in the square, perhaps from someone at the edges of the crowd or from an adjacent street. A small projectile, a stone thrown with force and ill intent, cut through the air and hit the white dove in mid-flight. A dull thud was heard and a collective cry of horror and indignation came from the crowd. The dove, previously a symbol of grace and divinity, plummeted from the sky like a torn leaf, its white wings now uncontrolled. It fell quickly, disappearing from the view of most, toward the lower rooftops and the internal courtyards of the Vatican complex. Cardinal Bellini felt a tightness in his chest, a mixture of shock and deep sadness. That act of gratuitous violence against such a pure symbol, at such a sacred moment, seemed to him a bad omen, a profanation. The smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of pain and concern. The image of the white dove falling, wounded, would not leave his mind. He knew with an urgency that took hold of his heart that he needed to do something. The image of the white dove plummeting, a stain of violated purity in the sacred sky, burned itself into Cardinal Lorenzo Bellini's mind. A visceral impulse, stronger than any conclave protocol, drove him to action. While the square still echoed with shock and indignation over the cowardly act, the cardinal, with surprising agility for his years, moved through the Vatican's internal corridors, following the approximate direction of the fall. His heart beat with an urgency that mixed compassion and a profound sadness for the wickedness he had witnessed. He searched the smaller courtyards, the hidden corners between the ancient walls, places rarely frequented during the conclave's commotion. The silence there was almost absolute, contrasting with the fervor of the square. Finally, near an ancient stone fountain, under the shadow of an oleander, he saw it. The white dove was huddled, visibly trembling. One of its wings stretched out in a pitiful manner, stained by a light trace of crimson blood against the immaculate whiteness of its feathers. Its little eyes, like small onyx beads, reflected a deep terror. "My poor creature," whispered the cardinal, approaching with the slowness of one who fears frightening a spirit. The dove tried to drag itself away, but a painful chirp escaped from its beak. The stone had struck it with force. With the utmost delicacy, Cardinal Bellini removed his zucchetto and, using it as an improvised cradle, managed to gather up the injured bird. It struggled weakly for a moment, but seemed to sense the gentleness in the old cleric's touch and quieted down, exhausted and in pain. Returning to his quarters without attracting undue attention required cunning. The conclave was at a critical point, and the sight of a cardinal carrying a bloody dove could generate all sorts of unwanted speculation. He found Francesco, the young seminarian who assisted him, a lad with an honest look and a good heart, in whom he implicitly trusted. "Francesco, my son, I need your help. An act of great cruelty has occurred," said the cardinal in a low voice, revealing the injured dove. The seminarian's eyes widened, first in surprise, then in compassion upon seeing the state of the bird and the bloodstain. "Your Eminence, the white dove from the chimney? The very same. Someone has hurt it." The cardinal's voice carried a weight that went beyond concern for the animal. It was the pain of seeing a symbol of peace desecrated. "We need to care for it in secret. No one else must know." In the cardinal's discreet quarters, away from curious eyes, they set up a refuge for the little patient. A box lined with soft linen served as a nest. With warm water and a strip of clean cloth, the cardinal, assisted by Francesco, cleaned the wound on the wing. It was an ugly contusion, the skin broken where the stone had impacted, and the wing appeared dislocated, swollen, and painful at the slightest touch. "She is in much pain, Your Eminence," observed Francesco, his voice choked and frightened. "She won't stop trembling." "Fear is a wound as deep as the physical one, my son," replied the cardinal, while trying to offer a few drops of water to the dove with the tip of his finger. The bird, however, refused, shrinking back whenever a hand approached, its eyes fixed on them with an understandable distrust. The trauma of the attack was evident. While the great decisions about the future of the church were being made just a few meters away, in the Sistine Chapel, Cardinal Bellini, in the rare intervals, devoted himself to that small life. Caring for the white dove became for him an act of silent reparation, a way to restore on a small scale the innocence that had been so brutally assaulted. Each drop of water he tried to offer, each gentle word he whispered, was a counterpoint to the stone of violence. The recovery of that bird, symbol of the Holy Spirit and peace, became for the old cardinal a living prayer, a plea for healing not only of the small injured wing, but also of the invisible wounds of evil in the world. The dense silence of the Vatican was broken only by the gentle breathing of the white dove, nestled under clean linen near the soft light filtering through the window. Cardinal Bellini and Francesco, attentive, dedicated every gesture to calming and treating the bird, such a powerful symbol in the heart of that conclave. In the distance, however, bells began to ring, first a timid peal, then a triumphant explosion of chimes that spread throughout the eternal city. Francesco raised his eyes, surprised, emotion cutting through the tension that had reigned since the attack on the dove. "Your Eminence, habemus papam!" he exclaimed, almost breathless. "The bells, the white smoke!" Bellini, his hands still trembling from the effort and emotion, rushed with Francesco to the window. The white smoke, thick and pure, rose in most elegant spirals from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, as if it wished to kiss the Roman sky. In the square, thousands erupted in jubilation, tears mixing with prayers. The faces, still marked by the image of the violated dove, now illuminated with a renewed feeling, hope. Inside the room, as if guided by something greater, the white dove began to stir. Hesitantly, it raised its head and, with visible effort, with the gentle assistance of Francesco, who was applying an herbal ointment to its wing, tested a small flutter of wings. Cardinal Bellini, moved to tears, murmured a silent prayer for the rebirth happening before his eyes. The old radio transmitted the voice of Cardinal Protodeacon Alberto Moretti, deep and solemn. "Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam, Eminentissimum as reverendissimum Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sanctae Romanae Ecclesiae Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposui Leonem Decimum Quartum. The new pope was Robert Francis Prevost, now Leo XIV, the first American pontiff in history. The news echoed through the square and like a whisper of providence, also inside the small room. At that exact moment, the white dove, still fragile, took a timid flight, crossing the evening light toward the parapet. Francesco, with tears in his eyes, observed the animal in the crowd. "Your Eminence, it's as if she knew." "Perhaps it is so, my son," replied Bellini, deeply moved. "Just like the church, wounded but able to rise again when cared for with tenderness." Outside, the crowd began to notice the presence of the white bird crossing the sky above the square, coinciding with the white smoke and the announcement of Leo XIV. For many, that flight was a sign that the Holy Spirit blessed the new cycle. People knelt, made the sign of the cross, and some wept openly, whispering about miracles. Cardinal Bellini felt hope bloom once again. Flying across the square, the white dove, no longer a symbol of pain, but of overcoming and unity, seemed to bless the people and the new pontificate. The afternoon of May 8th progressed, but the energy in St. Peter's Square and in the corridors of the Vatican remained electric. Pope Leo XIV had been announced, and the white dove, in a flight that many were already calling miraculous, had crossed the sky at the exact moment, blessing the beginning of the new pontificate before returning, exhausted but alive, to the windowsill of Cardinal Bellini, where Francesco welcomed it with renewed care. Cardinal Bellini, after witnessing the Urbi et Orbi blessing of the new pope from the window of his quarters, a moment of profound emotion and renewed hope, felt immersed in a contemplative serenity. The image of the dove, struggling and then flying in synchrony with the divine announcement, was for him a sign too powerful to be ignored. In the hours that followed, while the Vatican still buzzed with preparations for the upcoming rites and the accommodation of the new pontiff, the cardinal electors began to disperse from their confinement, gathering in small groups throughout the halls and internal courtyards. The tension of the conclave had given way to a mixture of relief, expectation, and reflection. It was in one of these more informal gatherings in a room adjacent to the Borgia apartments that Cardinal Bellini found himself surrounded by some of his closest confreres. They were men with whom he had shared years of service, concerns, and hopes for the church. The conversation, naturally, revolved around the election, the profile of the new pope, and the challenges that lay ahead. Sensing a moment of quiet, and with his heart still touched by the providence he felt he had witnessed, Cardinal Bellini cleared his throat softly. "My brothers," he began, his voice thick with contained emotion, "I would like to share something I witnessed these past 2 days, something that seemed to me a small but significant sign." And then he narrated the complete story of the white dove, from its appearance above the chimney, inspiring faith in the multitude, through the brutal act that injured it, its rescue and the discreet care in his quarters, to the climax, the hesitant yet determined flight of the bird over St. Peter's Square, precisely at the moment when the name of Leo XIV was proclaimed to the world. The cardinals present listened with growing attention. Some had already heard fragments of the story, the miracle of the white dove, as some faithful in the square were calling it, but hearing the complete account from the mouth of a respected colleague like Bellini gave it a new dimension. "An extraordinary coincidence, Lorenzo," commented Cardinal Antonio Visconti, in Italian with a serious countenance, but with a gleam of curiosity in his eyes. "Or perhaps not a mere coincidence." "Indeed," agreed Cardinal Emmanuel Dubois from West Africa with his quiet wisdom, "the Spirit blows where it wills, and sometimes speaks to us through the humblest signs. An injured dove that flies again at the moment when the church receives a new shepherd, there is a profound beauty in that, a message of resilience and hope." Bellini's sharing was not a formal speech, but a sincere testimony that touched the hearts of his peers. On that afternoon, still charged with the solemnity of the conclave, the story of the little bird brought an element of tenderness and divine mystery to the conversation. It reminded those men, leaders of the church, that faith also manifests itself in vulnerability, in healing, and in the small miracles of everyday life. There were no grand declarations or plans drawn from there, but a tacit understanding seemed to spread among them. The little white dove, in its trial and recovery, had become a shared symbol, a whisper of hope that would echo in their prayers and reflections, as Leo XIV's pontificate took its first steps. The golden light of late afternoon enveloped the Vatican gardens with an almost sacred serenity. Cardinal Bellini and Francesco walked through the internal courtyard, always attentive to the little white dove that now ventured somewhat more boldly between the shadows and the rays of sunlight. The weight of emotion from that day still hung in the air, while St. Peter's Square remained animated, already under the blessing of Leo XIV's new pontificate. Seated near a fountain, Bellini contemplated the bird, remembering what he had so often heard from Pope Francis, whose legacy still seemed to whisper among the Vatican walls. Respect for creation is an indispensable consequence of love for the Creator. These words now echoed with greater force in the face of his own silent witness of compassion and care. The simple decision to protect and heal a vulnerable being, while the world watched great historical events unfold. Francesco, sensing the depth of that moment, spoke in a gentle tone. "Your Eminence, it's remarkable how something so simple can touch so many people. That dove, its rescue, it's already become a topic of conversation among many here inside. They say it was a sign." The cardinal smiled, his eyes immersed in tenderness and gratitude. "We cannot always understand the designs of the Spirit, my son. Sometimes he breathes in gestures that seem small, but generate immense fruits." It was no longer necessary for multitudes to witness. For both of them, the truth was clear. That afternoon, the compassion with which they had cared for the white dove had transformed into more than an isolated act. It was a living lesson. In the discreet conversations of the Vatican, in the gleam of hope in the eyes of those who now heard the story, one could glimpse a future in which tenderness would also have a place in the corridors of power. When the sun finally bid farewell, a final flight of the dove gently traced across the garden. Bellini and Francesco followed with their gaze in silence. That image, so simple, contained a promise. In times of turbulence, it is not the great deeds that change everyone's destiny, but rather the silent gestures of tenderness, seeds of discreet miracles that bloom when least expected. As the bells of the basilica echoed over Rome, renewing hope and confirming a new beginning for the Church, there remained in the hearts of the two men, and now of many others, the certainty that the true miracle always reveals itself where there is compassion. Before continuing, share your thoughts on the Cardinal's actions. Was it the best decision? And if this story moved you, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. When you subscribe, you help us continue posting stories that can influence this world to take better care of our animals. I'll give you a moment to like and subscribe.